Hello all again. Thank you so very much for joining us for this second closed online training on introduction of reuse models. This training is organized by the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. I'm Svetlana Mikaleva, coordinator of GTPI based in UNEP in Paris. You can see also here connected today my fellow GTPI coordinator, Virginia Fernandez-Trapa from the World Tourism Organization based in Madrid. We have also with us Libera Assini, whom you know most of all, and you've been working a lot with her on reporting lately, and she's also based in UNEP with me. And of course, another very precious team member, Roxana Ashtari here. Hi, Roxana. Thank you for connecting from the World Tourism Organization. So this training will be led today by our GTPI trainer, the excellent Joe Hendricks that most of you know already. And considering extensive amount of information that Joe has to present to us today, we decided to slightly change the format of the training in comparison with the previous session, meaning Joe will present all of the information first to all of you, and then we will have 30 minutes in the end of her presentation to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to write down your questions in the chat or in your notebooks so that those questions can be asked to join the end of this training. May I also ask all of the colleagues who joined to mute themselves when they are not speaking, just for the smooth running of the session. And when you will be intervening, also please mention the sorry, I'm muting all. Please make sure you also, when you will be intervening, mention the name of your organization, just so that we know where you are from and understand better the context of the question. Once again, don't hesitate to ask questions intervening in the end of the session. Your questions and our discussion will not be recorded, will not be shared publicly. The only part that will be shared publicly is intervention from Joe. So this session remains confidential, private, so please do feel comfortable. Okay, so having said this, now over to you, Joe. And again, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for sharing your excellent expertise with us. So we are very, very happy and honored to have you. Over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. So we've got a really packed agenda today, as Svetlana said. What I'm going to do is just very quickly refresh your memories on the three categories of products for reporting and recap on some of the challenges that we discussed last time, if some of you were with us last time, and also some of the new challenges that have come up during the bilateral support programs that have been taking place over the past couple of weeks, with some of the suggestions that we've been making about how to overcome them. And then we'll move into the products themselves, and I'll be presenting some potential solutions. So as Svetlana said, we're going to record the session today, but only up until the point that I finish with the presentation. So you will be able to see a recording of the session. This is because we know a lot of the signatories would really like the opportunity to be able to watch the session back, or perhaps go back to some specific points. So you don't have to worry too much about taking lots of notes or trying to screenshot everything as you go through, because the slides and the recording of me will be made available. But that's why we want to keep the questions and answers to the end. So as Svetlana mentioned, if you have a question that pops into your mind as we go through, either write it in the chat and we can answer those later, jot it down on a pen and paper or a tablet or whatever you might have with you, so that we can do that at the end. So it is going to be quite a long time that you're sitting listening to me. So I'm hoping that I'm making it interesting for you. As usual, not every solution is going to work for everybody, but what we're going to be sharing today is just designed to get us all thinking a little bit differently, a bit more outside of the box about what those potential solutions can be. So in terms of the three categories for reporting, Libera presented this information for us last time, if you joined us last time. So I'm not going to spend too long on that here. but use the QR code if you do need to get the full methodology, or I'm sure a link can be put in the chat to help you to reach that if you need it. But these are the kind of category 1 products, those that are top priority for reporting. So I'm going to be covering potential solutions for all of these products in the coming slides. In terms of category 2 products, I've got suggestions for most of these in the slides that are coming up. And for category 3, which is huge category and very difficult to read on the screen, but there's a lot of items in here. And I have done my best to cover the vast majority of these in the slides that we're going to go through together. Now, in some cases, I've had to group things together for the sake of time, such as dry bathroom amenities. So I'm not going to do every single one of those individually. There's a few other group products that sit well together as well. But I know that many of you you're all at different points in your journey. And for some of you, it's the items on the category 3 list that are the ones that are really difficult for you to be able to find solutions for. So I wanted to make sure that we touched on as many things as we possibly can today so that you get the most out of this time. So a quick recap on the operational challenges and the mindset for change. At the beginning of November, when we first started this, the colleagues at GTPI asked you to tell us through that survey about your key challenges. And for those of you that have been working with me bilaterally, we've started to address some of these already and think about how we can overcome them. But what's also become clear over the last few weeks of working more closely with some of the signatories is the types of changes that many of you now need to implement really do involve changes to processes and procedures. They involve some important decisions around things like cost versus commitments to plastic reduction. I think the fact that so many of you have come so far in that journey already that you really are left with the much more difficult decisions. And I think this is where the solutions focused mindset really comes into play. So you might remember the mindset slide that I shared last time with the list here that you can see on the left being the most common responses that I generally tend to hear whenever I'm suggesting changes to people, and it might be you hear these responses yourselves in your business when you're suggesting changes. Now, working with the teams in the bilateral support groups, it's been really great to see this solutions focused mindset. Nobody has said to me, oh, we can't do that because, or we've always done it that way, which is great because these are really quite limiting beliefs about what you can achieve. But there still have been some quite legitimate concerns that have been raised about guest expectations, costs, suppliers, still some concerns around brand standards. So we've been doing a little bit of deeper digging into these points, and I wanted to share some of the ways that we've been looking at how we could overcome that. So guest expectations and behaviour, particularly when they're faced with changes, has still been a concern for many of you. And the way that we've been approaching this is to ask questions like, well, who exactly do we think is going to complain? Is it every single person that's staying in the hotel or doing an excursion with your business, or is it just the odd few? What exactly do we think they're going to complain about? Can we preempt those complaints in any way so that we can minimize them at source? What information can we give to people before they travel so we can manage expectations of changes? How will staff phrase responses to those complaints? What types of things are they going to say? Do they feel confident in responding to guest complaints? And if a complaint is really justified, how do you go about taking a new approach to the change that you might have put into place? And we will be addressing quite a lot of these in the next webinar that we do on the 7th of February when we look a bit more at guest and staff engagement. This is how we're going about those questions at the moment. Cost has been an issue as well. I mean, I totally understand this. Budgets are not limitless for any of us in business, but the questions that we're asking around this are, how can we budget for these additional costs in that case? Can financial savings from other sustainability actions or other business actions contribute to covering the cost? If the action that you want to implement is a visual communication, or if it helps to visually communicate somehow your commitment to reducing plastic, could those costs come out of the marketing department? Marketing always seems to have a much higher budget than other operational areas. And are businesses prepared to invest in the solution in order to meet the targets that they might have publicly stated on plastic? Depending on the geographical location of businesses, then available suppliers is a very relevant challenge. Questions we've been asking around this include whether or not any of our current suppliers are willing to change how they do business to help us to meet our targets. If they are willing to change, is it they're going to increase their costs to do that? Are we as businesses prepared to pay it? Can we pay it? Do we need to relook at the budgets for that? Have we looked far and deep enough and wide enough at what suppliers are out there? Have we looked locally? Is our business supplier onboarding process prohibitively complicated for smaller local businesses that do actually have the products that we need, but maybe they're not yet in your business database? And brand standards have still been tricky for some. And I think, you know, when you work in a business, or if you've been in that business for a long time, you can feel so identified with the brand standards that changing them almost feels like a change to your own personality. So it can be really hard to get people to engage in this, but so many of those standards have been around for decades and they're not necessarily aligned with new expectations of customers that are more concerned about sustainability. So considering a brand standard review is definitely recommended, and doing that regularly. So some of the questions that we've been discussing on this are if it's possible to identify which of the standards currently in the business are almost forcing you to use single-use plastics. Who in the business has got the power to change those standards? Somebody somewhere can take that decision, or a team somewhere is able to take that decision. But what kind of information, what kind of data does that person or that team need in order to make a more informed decision about that? And very importantly, to just ask ourselves that question: what would we do differently if reducing waste became the main focus of a brand standard review? And then, since the focus of this particular project is on multi-use alternatives, quite a common concern that's being raised is the loss of reusable stock. And this is obviously important because a product that has been designed to be reused many, many times and doesn't actually get reused is often worse in environmental terms than the single-use plastic that it's being designed to replace. Definitely going to be more expensive for your budget. So some questions we've been asking around this are whether or not businesses are willing and able to levy a kind of deposit system to ensure the return of reusable packaging, whether things like reusable bottles or reusable coffee cups could work in a similar way to the towel program, the pool towel program. So sometimes when a guest enters a hotel, there's a pool towel that's provided for them. Every time they take it to the towel shack, they're given a new one, or if they're given a card, and either on the day of departure, they hand in the towel or they hand in the card. If they don't get their money back, or they lose €10 or whatever it is. So similar styles of processes for other reusable items so that they're not walking out of the front door. Looking at how easy we're making it for people to, when I say dispose, it's kind of like place the reusable crockery into collection points around the business, for example, so that's easy for people to do, and then establishing regular collections of those by staff, and even ensuring that other people in the business, housekeeping teams particularly, are able to identify what reusable packaging belongs to the business in case guests have taken it off somewhere, they've gone back to their room or their cabin or something, and there needs to be a process to return that to its place. So we've been looking quite deeply and asking these much more detailed questions to try and get to the bottom of solutions that work in those particular businesses. So for every single one of those questions, you all might have a different answer because things would have to work differently in your business with your customer demographics, your geographical location, etc. So before we head into the potential solutions for the projects, just a good time again to remind ourselves of the success strategies of those businesses that are achieving this or that are going about this with a really positive approach. It's that unfailing commitment, like refusal to give in when they're faced by hurdles that seem difficult to climb. And what's been really great during the bilateral conversations is, I say, not hearing people say we can't do that because, but listening to people saying, right, how could we do that? What could we try? How can we keep to get over some of these challenges that we're facing? What else could we do? So that's been really great. Revise standards and procedures, very, very key to make sure that however the business is or the operational foundations that the business runs on are helping us to reduce waste, not causing us to create waste. That collaborative approach, particularly through the value chain, I think it's really important to engage procurement colleagues, and then proactive communications, which we still have the next webinar to cover, which I would highly recommend if they're not engaged already. Getting some of your marketing teams and social media teams, anybody that's responsible for getting customer messages, and even HR colleagues, because we'll be looking at how we engage staff as well. So for that webinar on the 7th of February, really opening that opportunity up to other people in the business. So with that in mind, and with our kind of solutions focused mindset in play, let's start to take a look at the products in the different operational areas. There is a focus on hotels here when I'm talking, and I have tried to include examples for other types of tourism businesses as well. But again, a lot of what we see could be applied in different situations. So it's there for inspiration, really, but there is a big focus on the accommodation side. So accommodations, looking at cabins and cruise operations as well, should fit quite well within these suggestions. So on the 3 slides I presented earlier, there were there's over 90 products that we saw in those category areas. In the coming slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a lot of images. Some of them are my own images. Some of them I've had to source online. But what I wanted to do is be able to help you visualize how you could make some of these changes, what they could look like in your business. Very importantly, if any of your businesses are doing any of these things already that we're showing on the screen today, and you would be happy to share or to develop some case studies with us, then please let us know, because we'd really like to share best practice ideas amongst the signatories so that we can accelerate that positive change towards circularity and reducing waste. So for bathrooms, we're going to start with bathrooms. We're going to look at these items that are listed. As I say, I'm not going to do every single one separately, but I'll give you an overview of how you could approach changes for these particular items. Now, I know a lot of you have already tackled miniature toiletry bottles already, and we covered reusable alternatives on our first group call. So it's more of a reminder for this one, with some reasons about why this is important, but also the potential for cost and waste reductions when we look at different ways of implementing change, whether we're switching to a large format toiletry that then gets recycled, or whether we're switching to refill, because it really does make a difference. When I speak with housekeeping teams, which I regularly do when I'm visiting hotels, they tell me that 2 things happen when it comes to these amenity bottles. Either guests take them home, especially if they're good quality amenities, or if they're branded with your logo, they want them perhaps as a memento of their trip. If the guests haven't taken the toiletry bottles with them, most of the small bottles, they're still half full of the shampoo or the gel or the body lotion or whatever it is. So actually, when we think about it, it's not just creating plastic waste, but we're also wasting a lot of product that's inside that small bottle. So your business is paying for something that your guests haven't even used, and then you're having to throw it away and most probably pay for the waste to be dealt with as well. So as I say, there are benefits to switching to larger format or reusable alternatives because you get a definite reduction in volume of plastic waste, but there are different ways that you can go about it. So the kinds of things that you need to consider if you haven't yet made that switch from miniature toiletries are, if you're going to choose a large format like these images on the screen, and you know that once they're empty, they're going into the recycling after use, then there's probably lots of different options available to you. There's so many brands these days that cater to a wide variety of tastes and styles. You might also want to just stick with the brands that you know and that your customers are already happy with. And a lot of those brands are now making larger format toiletries available. Like you can see on the picture there on the left, the kind of miniatures from Crabtree and Evelyn, as opposed to now the larger 600 milliliter bottles. So you can stay with the same supplier if you're happy with them. If your suppliers haven't yet done larger format bottles, then perhaps something that you want to be able to speak to them about. You might be able to choose more locally available alternatives so that products and packaging aren't travelling so far. That's a positive impact on your scope 3 emissions, and you've got a nice local procurement story to tell, for example. I shared the picture of the bottle with that great water saving message on it before, and I think looking around for that kind of style is really good for brands that maybe want to deliver multiple sustainability messages in one go. I think that's a really good way to do it. Other concerns, things that you can maybe try before you buy or before you invest in lots of new product. Pay attention to how much product comes out of that dispenser with each press of the pump. So I was in a hotel a few weeks ago, and the amount of liquid soap that came out of the pump when you pressed it was ridiculous. There was way too much for what you needed, which is going to waste a lot of product. And what we don't want to do is find that we're saving plastic, but we're wasting lots of something else. Equally, I've stayed in hotels where in the showers you've got to press the pump so many times and there's still really not a lot coming out, even though the bottle seems to be full. So really thinking about the impacts of the products that you choose on the guest experience. Also thinking about what the product itself is made from. What is the liquid content made from? Has it got microplastics or microbeads in there? What happens with that container when it's empty? Do you need to separate out the pump, because most of the pump mechanisms have got a little like a metal spiral on there? And a lot of the pumps are made from a different type of plastic than the bottle. So do you have to separate those? They're things that you can think about so that if you do switch to larger format packaging, you know that you've got those processes in place. You are going to reduce the volume compared to miniatures, but you are still going to have a significant amount of plastic waste. So I wanted to just illustrate the difference between larger format packaging and refillable packaging in terms of volume, because this is obviously quite important in the way that you're going to be reporting your statistics to the GTPI. So this is quite a good way to visualize it, sticking with the Crabtree and Evelyn picture. So if we imagine that a hotel consumes 600,000 litres of shampoo in a year, if the hotel provides that content, that 600,000 litres, in miniature bottles of 30 millilitres, then they need 20,000 bottles to do that, which gives you a total of 160,000 grams of plastic. If the hotel then switches to the larger format bottle, of Crabtree and Evelyn there, which is 600 ml, then to deliver that 600,000 litres, the hotel only needs 1,000 bottles. So straight away, you can see the difference in the volume of plastic by switching to that larger format packaging. But if you start to look into refill, that's when you really start to see the difference. So if the hotel has refillable bottles on the wall and then they're using like that a 5 litre dispenser there, if that dispenser, after it's empty, the 5 litre container that is, goes into the recycling then you're only producing 21,000 grams of plastic. But look at the difference if the suppliers that you work with actually take the initiative to take their 5 litre containers back, which we saw in the first call that I'd shared some information about a hotel in Mallorca that found a local supplier that would do that, and that significantly reduced their volumes of plastic. And you can see the difference there. So imagining that that 5 litre container goes back into reuse and reuse and reuse, and it's a maximum of 30 times in Mallorca for sanitary reasons. But in the end, it's only 700 grams of plastic to deliver the 600,000 litres of shampoo. So it really does make a difference, and it's definitely worth trying to engage with suppliers that are going to help you to meet your own targets when it comes to reducing volumes of plastic. And then, of course, you can do refills in lots of other ways using very different materials and styles. There's generally now a style for every business. Some dispensers, such as that white one you can see in the middle that you would kind of push vertically, a lot of those now operate with powder refills that you then just mix with water, so there's no flexible plastic pouch that you need to deal with at the end of it. The white bottle in the stand there, I think, is quite a nice, elegant way to provide toiletries, and that transparent line, that's really good for housekeeping teams to be able to see when the content needs to be replaced. So it's good for customers because it looks nice. It's also user friendly for the teams that have to work with them. Stainless steel tamper-proof brackets and glass bottles that you can see there is another way that some hotels are using those. Super easy to clean, very sturdy. The bottles and the pumps and everything could come off and go through a dishwashing cycle if they needed to be thoroughly cleaned because they're very sturdy, and you can do that. Those small little ceramic bottles I actually took a photograph of in a hotel in Laos in Southeast Asia. That was in a small boutique hotel. They looked really nice and really fitted with the hotel customer demographic there. When it comes to dry amenities and amenity packaging, then my first question to everybody really is to ask themselves if these items really and truly add value to the guest stay, because before we even think about switching to reusable options, we could think about whether we even need them or not. So there's 12 items on this tray, not including the paper bag and the sewing kits, not really plastic in those. Even if the guest don't use those items, they're going to be disposed of once the guest leaves, because the housekeeping team can never really be sure if they've used them or not, and so they are going to have to go into the bin. Personally, I don't see the point of having these items in the room, and I think, you know, we could do this very differently, but I also think, let's be honest with ourselves, ask ourselves really, truly, honestly, does your ideal customer book your accommodation because they get these items in their bathroom? Is their first question that they will ask themselves when they're booking, I wonder if there'll be a small plastic comb and a razor in the room, otherwise maybe I won't book to stay there. Of the 100+ filters that you can choose from on booking.com, miniature room amenities isn't one of them. And I think if it was truly a deciding factor for people, I'm sure that they would probably list it. So asking ourselves really, do our brand standards at the moment obligate us to use single-use plastic? If we've got a brand standard coming up for these dry amenities, now it's a good time to maybe take a look at all of those items that form part of these brand standards and identify, like we said earlier, the ones that are obligating you to use single-use plastic, and then asking that, you know, quite difficult question, but really, could we just take these away and not replace them at all, or at least make them available on request? If that is a stretch too far for many of you, because I know it can feel uncomfortable, there are some reusable alternatives to dry amenities, but they're obviously going to be more expensive per unit. And it's very likely that if they're nice, your guests are going to take them home. So it's going to be a constant cost that would need to either be budgeted for some way or absorbed by the business. Here you can see, for example, reusable slippers, a reusable shower cap, reusable cotton rounds, reusable face cloths, all of these things that would go through the same washing process as a face towel, a hand towel, or a bath towel that you would have anyway in your accommodation. So no reason really for them to be considered unhygienic. They just can go through the same washing process. Or you could choose to follow the example here of the Tasigo in Turkey. They leave a basket of reusable items in the room, and they very kindly, with a nice note, advise people that they're available for sale, and that if they're removed from the room, then a charge will be made on the credit card that the hotel has kept on file for them. And then there are some dry amenities for which, reusable alternatives that stay on your premises to be reused just don't exist, because you're not going to have anybody reuse a toothbrush or a comb or a razor. They're never going to be washed and put back into a room for another guest. So if you decide that you can't do without these items, it's likely that the alternatives to single-use plastic are going to be more expensive per unit. So one thing that you can do to make sure that they become reusable is encourage your guests to take them home and continue to use them once they've left the hotel. Obviously, that's going to increase your budget, which is why I think it's important to ask yourself whether or not you really need to make such items available in the room in the first place. Perhaps you could just put them in on request. And then a final word on dry amenity packaging is really to go beyond the label. So I was asked a while back by one of my hotel clients to look into packaging made from stone paper. Don't know if any of you have heard of it. And I found that a lot of it is actually mixed with some plastic content to kind of hold the paper together, which means it can be really difficult, if not impossible, to recycle in practice. Of course, it doesn't tell you that on the packaging. It sounds great, made from paper, and something that's a bit innovative. But in practice, what happens when it gets out of your accommodation and into the waste infrastructure? The image of the shower cap, that's one that I took in a hotel in Spain last year, which it looks like paper from the outside, but as soon as you open it, you can see inside there's a shiny plastic lining, and the shower cap itself is single-use plastic. I mean, you'd be amazed how many times I've been in a hotel and I've seen a whole set of amenities presented like this in the cardboard packaging, and when you open them, they look exactly like those that are on the tray, because inside that packaging, they're all made from single-use plastic. So they look great from the outside, but we're still creating lots of waste with these. In our next session in February, we'll also do a bit of a deeper dive into how you can identify and avoid that kind of greenwashing. But this certainly is a key one to look out for. Just because something's in cardboard or paper packaging on the outside doesn't mean there's a whole load of plastic on the inside. And they're still creating lots of single-use waste, and obviously that's what we're looking to avoid. In terms of hygiene ribbons, they are one of the items that you're being asked to report on. I still see a lot of these, which I find quite astonishing, to be honest. Personally, I think they're completely unnecessary because people just expect the toilet to be clean. I don't think we need to label that. We don't label the taps or the shower or the bed or the furniture as clean, but for some reason we've got this obsession with telling people that the toilet is clean. But if you think about it logically, that it's not a magic cleaning device. It's simply a piece of communications material. So I would also advise not simply switching to paper ones either. Just don't put anything there. We expect a clean toilet. If you can't bear it, if you think, oh, I really need to have something that kind of suggests to people the toilet's clean, then I saw this great idea in Plaitas Resort in Fuerteventura here in the Canary Islands, where they just used, the thicker towel that you would have on the floor near to the shower, and they just kind of placed that over the loo. And then, of course, the customer just puts that down. It's an item in the room that's going to get used anyway. So I thought that was really quite a nice way to do it. Hygiene bags, sanitary disposal is also a product that's on the list for you to report on. I think there's two things that are useful to think about here. Firstly, it's the guest experience when you're considering the material. So secondly, it's that the disposal of sanitary items in itself is just a one-time action. There's nothing we can do about that. So it's really important then to think, okay, what is the guest experience when they need to undertake this action in our bathrooms? So when thinking about materials, is the material one that can contain leaks and prevent odours? Because that type of packaging is very much favoured by many women. Speaking from personal experience, I've always been really concerned for the housekeepers that have to empty bins that contain sanitary waste. I mean, in some, well, not just in some cultures, all over the world, lots of my friends would rather flush sanitary items down the toilet than leave them in a waste bin wrapped in toilet roll for somebody else to deal with. So sanitary disposal bags actually play a large role in preventing pollution, marine pollution, pollution in our water infrastructures. They also play a big role in preventing your plumbing systems from becoming clogged up in hotels, on board ships, etc., smaller excursion boats, anywhere. They play a really big role in that. So perhaps having a message about preventing marine pollution by avoiding flushing anything but toilet roll in guest rooms or public bathrooms is also a useful approach to consider, but no reusable alternatives there unless the guests are obviously going to bring something themselves to use. I also see this quite a lot in premium rooms, particularly. For some reason, it appears that businesses feel that the dispenser isn't enough in a premium room. So even when there is a really nice soap in a dispenser, there's usually a miniature soap as well. There can sometimes even be miniature amenities because it's a premium room. And I think it's important that we remember that soaps, bar soaps in particular, they last a long time. They almost always outlast the guest. And so it's not just packaging waste, but the actual bar of soap that is regularly being wasted. So avoiding these helps us, again, not just to avoid the packaging waste, but also to avoid the product waste. So moving into a different operational area now, into cleaning, and the GTPI is asking you to report on all of these items. We did have a couple of questions from some of the signatories to clarify what we mean by these cleaning products. Hopefully the next slides will do that, but please jot down any additional questions you have if we don't manage to cover that, and you can ask us about those at the end. So I talked about this previously, this opportunity to clean with stabilised aqueous ozone, which when we're talking about cleaning packaging would help you to eliminate the hard plastic bottles that you can see at the back of the picture on the top, and also these mostly non-recyclable flexible pouches. What you would be doing is you would be decanting from a system into reusable bottles. So if you look at that picture on the bottom, there's a lot of reusable bottles on the shelves. They are reusable, so you're not reporting on those as single-use plastic. They're reusable items that are in your hotel. So even if you stick to the systems where you've got the flexible plastic pouches and you're putting a diluted material into those bottles, you are still reducing the volumes of plastic. But there are other things that are out there on the market that can help you to do that. We covered as well some of the business reasons around this. So a hotel in Mallorca, where they replaced the 3 products that you can see there on the screen, bleach, glass and bath cleaner, actually would have also saved themselves around €9,500 every year, as well as being able to eliminate the plastic packaging. So that was really quite interesting. And I am increasingly seeing, and I'm sure a lot of you are as well, solutions that avoid the transport of diluted products, even those that are concentrated, but there's still an element of water and of liquid in there, which means they rely on plastic packaging in order to be transported. So we're seeing an increase in things like powders and tablets. They are still going to generate some packaging waste, obviously, but if you switch to powders and tablets. But if you think about your wider sustainability objectives as well. If these products or this type of products are available to you locally, then you can very seriously reduce scope 3 emissions associated with transporting goods to your premises. Can make things a lot easier in terms of space. If you're stuck for storage space, it does come with the caveat that you are still going to be creating some single-use waste from those packages, even if you are reducing your volumes of plastic. And where possible, I mean, when you think about it, containers that are used to contain chemicals are very sturdy. They could be used hundreds of times over. Instead, what happens is when items like these that are on the shelf have been used by the hotel, they often either need to be disposed of into recycling, sometimes into hazardous waste, depending what was in them, which actually usually costs the business more money. I do sincerely believe that in some geographical locations where logistics allow, suppliers, actual suppliers, could put systems in place to collect empty packaging and reuse it, like we saw with the supplier of the toiletries in Mallorca. There are actually, there's a company operating in the Canary Islands that deal with pool chemicals. They even give the hotels, I think it's like a €4 discount for each container that's returned back to them. So that's a really good incentive. In other scenarios where hotels have maybe reached out to their suppliers to ask about returnable packaging, the answer has been that the price is going to go up. So that means the business then needs to make a decision between the impact of the price increment versus the impact of perhaps not meeting circularity targets in the way that you want to. And these are some real questions that your businesses will need to ask themselves. Sticking with cleaning and moving on to wet wipes, 99% of wet wipes are not flushable, even if they say they are flushable on the pack. If you do have housekeepers using wet wipes to clean bathrooms, it's very possible that those wet wipes are being discarded down the toilet. They're usually, almost all of them, made from a synthetic material, and so in the end that clogs up sewerage systems. It could, if that happens on your business premises, cost you a lot of money if you need to unblock the drains. When we talk about cleaning and hygiene and we give recommendations to businesses, I just want to reiterate that we've done this together with an organisation called Intertech Crystal, which some of you may work with already. So they're a very well-renowned hygiene, health and safety consultancy bureau that work with many different styles of businesses across the world on health, safety and hygiene. So back in 2020, during the pandemic, we communicated with them a lot about the recommendations that we were making to businesses so that they could reduce single-use plastic and still make sure that their processes and procedures were hygienic. So any suggestions that we have around cleaning do come from having had that technical input from Intertech Crystal. So we had some discussions with them about the efficacy of wet wipes, because if you read the instructions, for example, on a sanitizing product or a germicide product, most of those instructions will say leave the product for 60 seconds usually, so that it can actually work on the germs that you're trying to kill. Even if you've got a spray bottle and a reusable cloth, if you spray the table or whatever the surface is and you wipe it straight away, you've cleaned the surface. You haven't disinfected it because you haven't given the disinfectant or the sanitizing solution long enough to work. So what happens with wet wipes very often is that if they're not sufficiently moist, then we can literally just be spreading germs around the surfaces. So even though they feel like they should be a lot more hygienic, a lot of the times they're not. So always, from our perspective, we would want to see that we've got reusable cleaning cloths, and definitely not these flushable items. The thing you need to think about there is most of the cleaning cloths nowadays that are really effective are actually made from microfiber. So of course that's synthetic. And at the point that you are going to wash these, it's possible that those tiny microfibers, or some of them, are dislodged and they go into wastewater. So some laundry facilities do have filters to capture these, or you can wash microfibers in a bag. When you take them out, if there's any fibers left in that bag, then you can dispose of them with general waste. But microfiber has also got good qualities. It's really good in that it doesn't use so much water, for example. Some of them are threaded with colloidal silver, which has got antibacterial properties, but there are also other good cleaning cloths out there that are reusable, made from bamboo or glass fiber or other types of materials. So it's worth looking around and just thinking about the pros and cons of those. So let's move now from cleaning into food and beverage. There's quite a lot to cover here. So again, for the sake of time, I'm going to group these things together in some cases. Stirrers and straws I'm going to focus on. It might seem strange that I'm talking about straws because I know that probably nobody on this call has got plastic straws anymore, but in most cases plastic straws have been replaced with paper straws or some other single-use alternative, which obviously doesn't reduce waste unless they're made available on request. And there are lots of different types of reusable straws out there. So some pictures on here just to illustrate that beautiful glass of juice that you can see on the top left-hand side. I actually very much enjoyed drinking on board the TUI Mindshift one a couple of weeks ago when it was docked in Las Palmas and I was able to visit as part of the bilateral support. And they're using glass straws in the juice bar, and they're really, really beautiful and really easy to use. Staff were really happy with them, customers really enjoyed them, and they were fit for use in the juice bar, which was an inside bar on board the ship. Other options include stainless steel and bamboo straws. They're particularly popular. I've seen when I've travelled around Southeast Asia. I spent quite a bit of time in Laos and saw a lot of examples of those used there. There's also reusable plastic straws, like you can see in the bottom picture. I took these photos of these in a hotel in Antalya in Turkey, and they were using them for milkshakes and smoothies and that sort of thing. So I think when we think about reusable straws, you don't have to just have one size fits all or one type fits all. You could have, for example, a glass straw in a cocktail bar, but maybe a bamboo or a reusable plastic straw around the poolside, for example. Where wide circumference straws like bamboo are really quite good for smoothies. Stainless steel straws not so good for smoothies, just don't get the liquid volume through them. The glass straws are made from, it's like Pyrex, so they're really hard wearing. It takes a lot to break them. They're not, they're not going to break just because they drop on the floor necessarily. They are quite hard wearing. Straw hygiene is probably the thing that's come into most of your minds when you look at these at the moment. I quite liked this sign, which was in the Bloom Boutique Hotel in Laos. I took this when I stayed there. It tells you how to keep a straw clean naturally. And it gives you confidence that this is what they're actually doing with their own straws on site. So at the same time as providing you with them, you know that they're keeping them clean. Depending on your operation, the time required to clean straws manually with these little brushes might just be too difficult for you to find. You might consider using something like a sonic bath. Now, normally these are used for things like jewellery. So if you've got like a watch strap or something you really want to get the dirt out from very, very tight places, they can go into a sonic bath. So it's ideal to actually get any dirt or anything out, dried on milk or whatever it might be, from inside a straw. So they could go into the sonic baths, and that high frequency just means that everything comes apart and it comes out into the liquid in the sonic bath. Then obviously you need to have some washing and rinsing processes after that. There's no reason really why a reusable straw should be any less hygienic than knives, forks and spoons that everybody will eat from if they're washed in the same way. If you're concerned about that perception of hygiene, that people would think they're not going to be hygienic, then you can have a note somewhere about them going through the dishwasher with other cutlery. We'll cover things again in the communications webinar around things like that. So stirrers, when it comes to stirring tea and coffee, I am actually a great fan of the common spoon. Just a usual spoon that we all have at home. But if you work in hospitality, you'll probably know it's astonishing how many of these spoons just seem to go missing. You're constantly buying spoons for some reason. If you wanted something different to a spoon, there are glass swizzlers, they call them, that you can see in the bottom right there, maybe small ones for coffee, longer ones for different types of drinks. They've got stainless steel swizzlers, they've got really nice decorative ones for cocktails, but I imagine depending on your clientele they could very easily go missing because they do look nice. You would be constantly reinvesting in those. Cocktail picks, there's also stainless steel reusable cocktail picks as well that could be used to decorate cocktails. They could maybe even be used on buffets or to hold something together like a club sandwich, for example, because they come in all different shapes and sizes. So there are reusable items out there for almost everything. The issue is, how do you operationalize them in your particular business? And I had a conversation with somebody the other day about why they had reusable ceramic tea and coffee cups, but they had single-use wooden stirrers next to them. The spoons they didn't have. And it was because in this particular outlet, the tea and coffee stations at the buffet and at the service bars, what was happening is that customers were putting used spoons back into the container where the clean spoons were kept. So you can imagine a container like the one on the left with clean spoons, and people stirring their coffee or their tea, putting it back in the same container. And so that was causing problems, and there had to be a switch to single-use wooden stirrers. And then again on the TUI Mindshift, when I was on it a couple of weeks ago, I saw this hanging cutlery stand which was on the tables, and I thought, oh, if you just use that for spoons and there was only spoons on there, it would be really obvious that they were the clean spoons, and then you could have a container next to that where the dirty spoons would go. It's going to be much easier for people to drop a spoon into a container, and they're going to know not to put a dirty spoon back up on a hook. And it just made me think that a lot of the time we've got products on our premises that are used for different purposes, but we could just change how we think about them a little bit and maybe use them to help us achieve and overcome some of those hurdles that we're facing every day in the operation. And then takeaway items are obviously a big problem for many of you, a big challenge for many of you. And I think in my mind there are two different types of takeaway that we need to consider. So it's either takeaway because the people are going to literally leave your premises and not come back, in which case reusable options are really not going to be suitable, or it's takeaway because they are going to pick a snack up from somewhere and they're going to take it somewhere else on the premises. So take it to the swimming pool, take it back to their room or cabin, take it down to the beach, take it on a picnic, for example. So if it's a takeaway style, but it's going to be consumed on site, then there are a number of reusable options for this already. So reusable coffee cups that look exactly like a takeaway coffee cup. And for some people, it's, I don't know, they just prefer to take the coffee and drink it by the pool, but not in a ceramic cup. They just feel so much more normal to have it in something that looks like a takeaway cup. It gives them that same feeling. The pictures that you can see there of the fridge and of the takeaway food, they're actually pictures a friend of mine took when she went on a Virgin cruise a few months ago, and all of those packagings are reusable. And then they've just got lots of like reusable crockery collection points around the ship where people leave them after they've finished with them, and then they go back into the kitchen and they go back into reuse. There's some nice examples here of serving ice creams in reusable containers for people to either sit and eat near a pool. There's a picture on the right that shows you what a reusable crockery collection point could look like. I took that here in Gran Canaria, regularly attended by the staff to make sure that they get those reusable items back into the kitchen for washing, and they also do a quick run around the sunbeds to make sure that they're not missing any items or guests aren't confusing them and putting them into recycling rather than the returnable crockery drawer. Condiments are obviously a big thing for many of you. I think a lot of you have heard my story about why I think condiment sachets are not more hygienic, predominantly because of the way we interact with them. We have to look through, you know, find which one we want, by which time you've touched all of them. You can't open them because it's really difficult. You pass it to somebody else, they can't open it either, and we put it back. You try and tear it with your teeth and you still can't open it, and you know that there's nothing hygienic about single-use sachets. So they might appear to be theoretically, but when you actually sit and watch people's behavior, then it's very different. So I think depending on your brand style, you could opt for any of these types of solutions on the screen. You could go with extra large format or a domestic size format. You could decant into small dishes from larger packaging, so you reduce your volumes. The little tins that you see there, that was a close-up from the screenshot of the Virgin Cruise. That's how they're making condiments available for takeout. You could just as easily apply that to room service or to be able to carry on itinerary tours. And then there's breakfast condiments as well. So I think we are increasingly seeing quite a large array of stylish format dispensers, which are easy to use and easy to clean. You could, however, also like decant jams into larger bowls, and then the guests fill, you know, their own small ceramic dish, or they just simply add the jam to their plate if that's what they want to do. And the bottom left picture is how jam and sugar and butter was served to me in a hotel in Laos in Southeast Asia, and you could choose your jam flavors as well when they came to take your order, so that reduced food waste, which I thought was quite good. I do very often get people voice concerns around the perception, and I say perception, of hygiene of jams that are served in glass bowls or jars like this, and I think it's because people believe that there's going to be cross-contamination, but how are we really using that word cross-contamination? So really, most of the steps to avoid cross-contamination when serving a buffet are happening in the back of house at the preparation phase, where raw and cooked food shouldn't mix, for example, because it would cause illness if that was the case. The biggest issues on open buffets for hygiene and cross-contamination are generally from like sneeze and cough issues, for which most of the time there's a sneeze screen, and the regular changing of serving utensils is what helps us to prevent cross-contamination on a buffet. If you think about it logically, nobody says that the rest of the buffet that is served in a bulk format is unhygienic. No, we don't wrap every chip, we don't wrap every potato, every piece of meat. So why is it that the jam and the butter are unhygienic if they're served in bulk, but nothing else is? I think most of the time, what we really mean when we think about cross-contamination is cleanliness, tidiness, avoiding food waste, all of which are really important. So if somebody uses the same spoon, let's say, to serve strawberry jam, and then they use the same spoon to put some apricot jam on their plate, you're not going to become ill by eating the two types of jam together, but your buffet will look untidy. You might get to a point where eventually you think, we're going to have to change this now, it looks terrible and it creates food waste, but it's not necessarily illness that is the issue. So it's really thinking about, why is it that these items are seen to be unhygienic and others aren't, and then looking at how do we achieve this differently. Maybe we need to come back and look at how often we're cleaning the utensils, etc., etc., to just change our mindset around that. Packaging for sweets and crisps, really hard to replace, especially with reusable alternatives. I've spent ages researching this. It's really very likely that it's going to require you to make changes to the way that snacks are served. And I think firstly, therefore, that depends on where snacks are being served. Is it part of the minibar service? Are there snacks on arrival? Is it at the actual bar when they're taking a drink? The minibar glass, the little glass jars there that you can see are from a hotel in London. If you have jars like that and they go back to the supplier to be refilled, or if they stay on site and you refill them from larger volume, then obviously you're reducing plastic. But if they're going to be thrown straight into glass recycling, then we're switching from single-use plastic to single-use glass, which actually has a really high environmental impact. In the top middle, that's a picture from a hotel in Mallorca. They buy their snacks in larger volumes, decant them into reusable jars. Same with the picture on the bottom left, decanting from larger packaging, or even having deliveries from refill stores if such things exist. And these bags are great for things like picnics, or tourists on itinerary trips like hiking and cycling, for example. Popcorn kernels can be purchased in really large volume packs, and of course they're quite small. If you're going to pop the kernel fresh, you could do this yourself. You could serve it decanted into reusable dishes. You could mix your own spices with it if you wanted to do something like that, or you can just serve it plain. In a hotel that my husband worked in a while back, the chef actually used to make his own crisps and biscuits. It was a small boutique hotel, but that level of attention to detail really wowed the guests. They absolutely loved it. But in the end, I think, you know, you've got to think about where are we serving these snacks? Are they there to make an income? How can we do this? Can we switch to bigger bulk and decanted snacks if we're giving them away freely, so that at least you reduce your volumes and you move away from single-use packaging? But it is a difficult one. Yogurts as well. I think, to be fair, yogurts are very easy to serve in bulk, but we don't always perhaps like how they look when they go onto a buffet at the end of the day. I think it's like everything else that we've gone through already. Depends on your style, your customer demographic, how you decide to go about this. So you could decant into smaller jars yourself. If you've got lidded jars, like the picture there on the top left-hand corner, they're quite good because you could differentiate then things like soya yogurts and lactose-free yogurts, so that you could buy them in slightly bigger bulk and still cater for dietary requirements without always having to have the single-use packaging. You could decant into larger service bowls, like you can see in the top middle, or I found a nice picture online of this yogurt bar, which I thought looked really nice on the bottom left. That looks like a great idea. And then for yogurt drinks, you know, if you want to avoid the little bottles like an Actimel or whatever they are, you can use refillable serving bottles like these. And if you don't really like the look of how the kind of yogurt sits on the inside, you could always have non-see-through bottles, but then it's a bit more difficult for staff to see when they need to be filled again. So you'd need to have some procedures in place for that. Back to wet wipes and, you know, refreshing towels, but this time in the food and beverage operation, particularly after eating finger food or products like prawns that guests might need to peel themselves, or it might be a refreshing wipe offered between meal services. You can achieve this kind of thing just by having, especially with finger food anyway, like a bowl of warm water and one slice of lemon. Or thinking a little bit differently, like a small towel steamer. Now, you would normally see these in a spa, not necessarily in a restaurant, but you could put a little bit of lemon essential oil in there for a pleasant fragrance. But obviously then you need to think about the options of or the impacts of these options too. So there's going to be organic waste from the lemons. You're going to need to have procedures to make sure you've got enough towels, that they're collected, they're washed, they're dried, etc. So if you've got quite a high turnover, particularly with the sorts of products that would necessitate these, then it might not be suitable. Perhaps just a fragrance-free hand sanitizer somewhere in a reusable bottle would be better all around. Coffee capsules, solutions for this are going to vary quite drastically depending on where the capsules are used. So whether they're used in the bar, in the breakfast room, in the guest rooms, maybe they're only in VIP rooms. In guest rooms, for example, could you decant the coffee into a reusable glass jar? So you can see It's very difficult to see actually. I put a red circle around it on the second picture from the left, and that's actually a small glass jar in a hotel in Turkey. They decant the coffee in there from a larger jar and just fill it. They put a little sticker over it so that it's sealed. You can also see, if you look very carefully at the back of their sugar pourer, so that they don't have single-use sugar sticks either. You could provide a French press, but then you need to think about number of people in the room, size of the press, how people going to dispose of the coffee grounds every time they've had a coffee. Do they have to clean the press themselves? Do they ring down to get a new one? Maybe that would work better in apartments where there's going to be a kitchen and a sink, as would a coffee percolator, for example. There are reusable capsules most of them are made to be compatible with an espresso drop down style. Quite messy, they're a bit finicky to use. I've got some at home and they really drive me mad. They would still need you to give coffee in a jar and to give guests a means to dispose of the grounds, so you'd need to think of processes and communications to support this. I have stayed in hotels where they've actually taken tea, coffee services out of the guest rooms, and they've put a coffee machine on each floor and sold as a good thing. So rather than we've taken something away from you, more like just go to the end of the corridor and get yourself a cappuccino or a cafe macchiato or something quite amazing that you would actually never get from your tea and coffee service in the guest room. So a matter of perspective on how you could promote that. But then the process comes into place. You need somebody to check there's always clean cups, that it's got milk in if that's how it's being used, that it's clean, etc. So with everything, there's always going to be pros and cons. Very difficult. If it is very difficult for you to move away from coffee capsules quickly, then perhaps what you could think about is informing your guests about how you are responsibly disposing of them, assuming that you are responsibly disposing of them. So I saw this communication in a hotel in Madrid, and they use round tabs and they get disposed of into this collection point, and the information tells the guests that the coffee pods are going back to Nespresso for processing, and it's right there next to the coffee machine, so you can read it while you're getting your coffee. And I have to say, it did make me feel better about using that machine, knowing that I wasn't creating this waste that was going to go into landfill. Serving tea bags that are wrapped in plastic, or even tea bags that are wrapped in paper, but there's still, the bag is plastic, or there's a synthetic glue that holds the bag together. So just because it doesn't look like plastic on the outside doesn't mean it's completely free from plastic. It's a good idea to check that with suppliers on like a material data sheet or something. If you know that your guests drink a lot of a certain tea, like a breakfast tea, then perhaps you could make a full urn of breakfast tea using loose tea yourselves. Used tea leaves could then go into gardens, like you could do with coffee grounds. A loose tea menu could be a potential option for food and beverage areas and for guest rooms. A good option for the specialty teas, but would require investments in things like diffuser pots or diffuser cups, like you can see there on the screen. And then you would need to think about it the same like you do with the coffee. How are you going to keep the tea fresh? How are the guests going to dispose of the tea leaves, etc.? Water, I told you this was going to be quite quick and heavy. Well, I think we're flying through it, but there's so much information in here. We've gone through previously water and replacing single-use plastic in businesses. I think there are loads and loads of ways to do this now. It's just a matter of finding what works for you and what works for your brand style. So it could be any of these ways that you see on the screen. I think one of the main points that's coming up in conversations is sometimes the cost that's associated to perhaps filtration on site or something. But I think this is now where you get to a point where your brand has to make a decision whether it's willing to invest in the sustainability actions that are necessary to meet commitments, or whether those cost savings that are gained elsewhere in the business could be designated for investment in on-site refill, cost savings from renewable energies even, so they don't necessarily have to come out of the food and beverage budget because that's particularly tight already. And then I just wanted to remind you of some of the great ideas and some of the new innovations that are out there. We looked at this last time. It was an atmospheric water generator being used in Abu Dhabi. To date, since June, 6 of these machines have actually produced just over 88,000 litres of water. People on the premises were originally using 500ml bottles of plastic, so it's 176,000 single-use plastic bottles that have been avoided in much less than a year already, which was a great result. And then the systems that were really interesting, if you've got a mix of board bases on site, because some of them are now incorporating payment functions. So if there are people on all-inclusive, it recognises that they don't pay. If there are people on bed and breakfast, it recognises that and they do pay. So really good systems out there. Looking at water for itinerary trips, which is obviously a really big consideration. The larger water brick that you can see top left there can be big for groups, good for big groups and in cooler destinations where the water isn't going to get hot from the vehicle. Although having had some really good chats with EXO over the last few weeks, we found this can be quite difficult for when drivers maybe work with different tour operators, and the tour operator that comes after your trip actually wants the driver to provide single-use plastic bottles. And so now the driver's left with a container, the water that's in it, it might sit there for a month, it might absorb the taste of the plastic, and driver ends up having to throw the water away. So that was a really good, interesting insight that we were able to get to through doing some more in-depth work there. And then those pictures along the bottom show something that EXO has done to be able to take those gallon bottles and actually make it easier to serve from them when you're on an itinerary trip. So there's a bag that's been designed and the bottle goes upside down, and it actually has a tap then fixed to the neck, and it's much easier to be able to get the water into the customer's reusable bottles, and they're easier to keep them cool with the cool boxes that you can see there. So that was really interesting to see. And on cruise ships, I've spent the last 2 weekends on the Tui Mein Schiff and Tui Marella cruises. They regularly come into Las Palmas. Amazing steps to avoid plastic on both of the ships. But talking about water, there are refill stations on various points on all of the decks. Nice decanters are provided for passengers in the rooms, and there's also other ways of providing water up on pool decks, which was really great to see. And then thinking about apartments, long stays, self-catering facilities with kitchens, there are other opportunities there, from having kind of small under-counter filtration units, but I would suggest taking care to make sure you capture wastewater and redirect that to gardens or pools or something. Jugs with filters inside, water coolers with filters inside, which sit inside of a fridge that are quite sturdy, and also a thing to hold a gallon in place. I had something like this in an apartment in Mexico about 5 years ago. It's not my picture, but it was exactly like that. So other opportunities there for water. Cling film is on the list. We covered cling film already. I showed you these reusable rack trolleys before. We've had quite a lot of interest from the signatories in using those. These were the ideas that we shared about avoiding cling film in kitchens as well as in guest rooms, and for things like room service and picnics. So I won't dwell on those. As I say, you'll get the slides and you'll be able to go through these in your own time. But going further back into the back of house now, where all of this food and beverage is actually being prepared. So into kitchens again, I've combined a few things in here too. I think there's a couple of things that I've not covered in the slides, but most of them we'll be able to see here. So I did some searching on the internet just for, reusable waterproof aprons and reusable hairnets, and a whole range of possibilities comes up. So one of the things that I think is really important is to involve procurement teams in this search for the types of products that are actually out there in the market, and maybe with the suppliers that you've got, that you already trust, that are in your supplier database, asking them first if they can help you to source the kind of good quality products that you need that are fit for purpose. But again, like I was saying at the beginning, maybe thinking about, is there a possibility to be a bit more flexible in the procurement procedures and buy locally rather than centrally, if that's possible, and making it a little bit easier for smaller suppliers that might have exactly what you want at a good price point, but it's too complex for them to get into your supplier database. Are there any concessions or any ways that it can be made easier for them to do so? Because there are actually quite a lot of solutions out there. But something that's proven really difficult to find a solution for are vacuum bags and piping bags. I wish I had a magic answer to this. I don't. We've spent some time backwards and forwards in conversations and on emails to get feedback from kitchen teams about reusable piping bags, but it's generally been as negative feedback, as in not negative complaints, but negative that, you know, they're just not a good choice. They can often absorb grease, fats, odours from previous contents. They're time consuming to clean. Most of them are aimed at the domestic market, really, not at the commercial market. So the only way, and this probably will sound unpopular, but to reduce consumption of these items at the moment would be to reconsider the menus so that you don't require so much of their use in the first place. And I think this is an area where we need to see a lot more innovation from the supplier side. And I'm sure that will come if we can show that the demand is there. Baking sheets and moulds, again, an internet search brings up lots of different options for silicone baking sheets and moulds. You'd need processes for washing, drying and storage for those, but it would be the same as any other reusable items that you have in the kitchen. And then gloves. Gloves in the kitchen, they're obviously worn to avoid cross-contamination, but I'm sure most of you are aware that very often when people wear gloves, they stop washing their hands, or they don't wash them as often because they think their hands are clean. And of course their hands are clean, but the gloves aren't. Or it could be that they change their gloves so regularly that hundreds of pairs of single-use gloves are being used daily in kitchens. Some of you might not know, but for about 7 years, I was a health and safety advisor at the Thomas Cook Group, and we were trained to help our hotels to ensure that we, kept health and safety issues, including hygiene issues, to a minimum. When we were dealing with illness outbreaks, one thing that we did that worked really well was we set a hand washing regime in the kitchen. So every 30 minutes, an alarm would sound, which sounds drastic, but it really worked. When that alarm sounded, everybody would go and wash their hands, and it was made easier by having hand washing stations in all the food preparation areas. So that made it really easy to do. We also asked people to treat hand washing in the same way that they would treat working with a chopping board. So you would always wash a chopping board or sanitize it between different uses so that you would avoid cross-contamination. So think about that in the same way with your hands. When it's not possible to install hand washing sinks everywhere, because it might not be, then fragrance-free sanitizing gels might work. There's some good foot-operated systems now that would be quite useful in kitchens. Some companies are even selling like foam refills, so it's a powder, it turns into a foam, it comes in a paper sachet, it goes into the sanitizer. So there's ways still to do that without plastic, but you would get some waste. Reusable gloves, quite tricky in kitchen scenarios because they're quite thick material, and so the dexterity that a lot of the chefs need to cook with is often lost with those reusable gloves. They're much better when they're being used for cleaning activities, for example. So really thinking about the procedure of hand washing. If in your destination there is no legislation around having gloves in the kitchen, then really try to think about what those procedures could be for the hand washing. We are getting quite close to the end now, moving into logistics, packaging materials, pallet wraps, those types of things. Really, they're going to be in the hands of your suppliers. To be honest, they're going to be in the hands, even further down the value chain. I don't know how far your supply chain goes and how far you can reach, but there are some solutions that you could potentially suggest to them. Maybe, depending on your relationships, you might even be prepared to co-invest yourselves as a business. Last time that we were together, I talked to you about reusable pallet wraps that Latin American Airlines had used for cargo. But I was doing, again, an internet search the other day to look at well, where else can these be sourced? Are there any, suppliers that are actually selling them? Lots of different companies actually come up, including these thermal pallet covers, for example, which would be great for transporting frozen goods. So if you put a search in the internet for reusable pallet wraps, loads of things come up. So I think that could be a good thing potentially for procurement teams to do, to identify them and kind of take that first step and then say to the suppliers, or further, as far down the value chain as you could go, we've seen these, how do you feel about this? Could we implement them? What kind of logistics need to be in place though for when that reusable pallet wrap gets to your premises? How are you going to make sure that you get it to the supplier? So it's still going to need that kind of logistics put in place. Styrofoam boxes, polystyrene boxes. I heard a while back now, it was a couple of years ago, talking with Six Senses, that I know a signatory. I'm not sure if there's anyone on the call today, but I remember them telling me that they actually worked with their suppliers and they provided reusable ice boxes themselves for the suppliers so that they could avoid the polystyrene boxes, and that was done obviously with a very local supply chain, but it meant that then the supplier had that box and then it always came back into the hotels for them to use. What you would need to be thinking about there are the processes and procedures to make sure they're cleaned. Who's doing that? Is it the supplier? Is it you on the receiving end? So again, thinking about the processes and procedures, but a really interesting way to look at it. There have been some concerns about the weight of these things, and especially because they would be heavier to begin with and then heavy with the contents in. So also thinking about that in terms of manoeuvrability. Would they need to be moved around the kitchen differently on a kind of a sort of delivery trolley or something? So really thinking about the impact of that on the staff. And just also bearing in mind that even if it doesn't work for, let's say, one particular type of frozen fish, which is what usually comes in these products, does it work for another type? Could they come in smaller boxes and just be more boxes but smaller so they're easier to carry? Or could you just implement this in a certain kitchen in an a la carte restaurant, for example, but not in the main kitchens where you might get bigger volumes of deliveries? So like I say, it doesn't have to be one size fits all. If you're reducing some volume, then that's a really good way to be moving forward. For things like packing peanuts, gosh, I was looking at this, the main alternative was shredded paper, but that's obviously still going to create waste and it's heavier at the transport. I saw suggestions about using popcorn, but that gives you food waste, about using clothes and linens that have been cut into strips, but then they would be really heavy. How would you get them back to the original supplier? So looking for solutions that would be possible to implement in terms of packaging and packaging around things. Still really quite difficult, a bit more work to be done there. One thing I think we could do though is really try to reach out to the suppliers and make sure that they're not just sending us, a huge box, loads of packing strips and something tiny in the, so we don't need to fill up that empty space in the first place, just letting them know that we want to look for those things. Guest rooms in apartments, cabins, we've covered a lot of this already. So even though it's a long list, I'm not going to go through a lot of them because we've covered them in the bathroom. On this list, I saw single-use ashtrays. I'm not sure where that came from, whether that's from itinerary tours. If anybody's using single-use ashtrays, it would be really good to let us know in the chat. I did Google and look for reusable ashtrays, and some little pocket size cigarette butt holders come up. So that might be interesting for tour operators, might also be interesting for hotels or for any accommodation that wants to give their guests something to avoid pollution on beaches and in marine environments. So you can just do an internet search for reusable or pocket size cigarette butt holders. But we'll move on to bin liners. Very quickly, we covered this quite a lot already on the previous call. First question to consider, do you really need a bin liner? That's very much going to depend on the type of waste that a guest is going to produce. it's a self-catering apartment where there's going to be more food waste, then perhaps you do need a liner for that. If the majority of waste is dry recyclables like plastic bottles or paper, then maybe you don't really need a liner at all, and it's just the processes around cleaning the reusable liner or cleaning the cylinder. So we'd set those processes up with a hotel in Mallorca. I shared these details with you last time. When you're buying in bulk, because these things look quite expensive when you look at them on the supplier websites, that's usually because they're also supplying just to, you know, people like me and you to buy them at home. When you're buying at the levels of hotel volumes, then the price comes right down. And in this case, this hotel with 306 rooms would have had the return on investment in a year. Laundry bags. Many hotels are switching to reusable laundry bags now. Sometimes they're being taken by guests. Guests put their own dirty laundry in, then they take them home. It means you've got to constantly repurchase reusable bags, which can be more expensive. You could overcome that by having reusable baskets, which definitely are not going to fit in people's luggage. You'd identify the room number with a little tag and a removable marker pen. This basket is actually made from single-use plastic bags that have been weaved by local people. You can find it in Jaya House in Cambodia, so there's a great story behind that. If your laundry is on site, it's also a lot easier for you to avoid garment covers altogether. Or if your laundry is off site, you could perhaps talk with the laundry providers or whether they would be willing and able to bring laundry back under a kind of reusable cover like this, and then you would just have to find a way to identify who are, you know, which clothes or which guests do these clothes actually belong to. Most of the time the cover is just to make sure that the clothes, when they're coming back, don't get stained with something else. So you can do that without needing single use covers. You could even just use old linens if you wanted to do so. We don't need to necessarily be wrapping items in plastic either, especially if you've got your own laundry on site. If you've just got a system to use these kind of trolleys, the green one that you see at the bottom, so that maybe green trolleys control or have dirty linens in, and if you've got a red trolley, it's got the clean linen in, and you don't mix them, or a trolley without a cover, or a reusable rack like we saw before. Once items are in storage, if they need to stay there for a long time, such as maybe you switch between winter and summer duvets, just cover those with large king size sheets or these kind of packing bags, and really try to avoid anything coming back like towels wrapped in single-use plastic if they're coming back in from a laundry provider. I think this picture there just shows how terrible that looks when they're provided on the shelf. I took a picture of this in a hotel gym a while back. Glass covers. I think majority of hotels and accommodations now are using cardboard or paper glass covers. Obviously they're single use. This is a reusable project, so, or why not go, you know, all out and have it a zero waste project and just have no glass covers at all. Now there's two schools of thought on this. Some health and safety experts say that if the glasses are facing upwards, they should be covered, so that nothing drops into them and nobody coughs and sneezes like on the rim. There are other health and safety experts that say the glass should be face down on a surface that is clean and easy to clean, and that way nothing will drop in and no one can cough or sneeze on the rim. You need to check with your own health and safety people about what their preferred option is. There are also, though, reusable covers as well. So I saw these cotton ones, you can see on the bottom right there. You need some processes for laundering them. Need to make sure the guests know what to do them, they don't go missing in the room. You could get them made locally and you could tell a nice story about them. Newspaper bags and turn down gifts, anything like sweets, biscuits, macaroons, cakes, things that could be bought in larger volume packaging or even made in your own kitchen, presented on a tray or something a bit more innovatively. I saw this picture, which is a chocolate under a glass of wine, which I thought was quite a nice way to do it. Maybe you don't have to provide food at all. It could be a different style of gift. It could even just be a card with an inspiring quote or a message before people go to sleep. Reusable newspaper bags are also widely available, so you'll be able to find those if you searched online. Key cards are on the list. Personally, I don't see key cards as a single-use item, because I think the idea is, you know, they're supposed to be returned and used over and over again, but of course so many people do go home with them. I quite like that message in the middle, which a play on words. Conservation is key, really encouraging people to bring the key card back. Depending on your installation and available tech and your type of clientele, you might go totally keyless. You might just go back to a good old-fashioned key that opens the door. You might decide to switch to other types of key cards. Bear in mind, if you do, one thing that is important, all key cards have electronics inside of them. If a wooden key card gets damaged and then you need to dispose of that, maybe the supplier could take those electronics back, maybe not. Maybe you need to dispose of them with e-waste, but they are actually very easy to get to when it's a wooden key card, not quite so much with plastic key cards. Service areas, we are getting very, very close to the end of the list now. So we're going to have a look at a couple of random things in here. I don't have answers to all of them, particularly reusable undergarments in spas. I think that's probably not going to happen, to be honest. You're not going to necessarily give somebody an undergarment and then take it back and expect somebody else to wear it. Packaging around corporate gifts, I think you can reach out to your own suppliers about those. Umbrella covers, there's lots of those that are reusable. What I did have a look into was all-inclusive wristbands. So many hotels offer multi-board basis now that it is important to be able to identify guests that have all-inclusive. If the whole hotel is all-inclusive, then obviously you don't need anything. Maybe you could just use a key card if you're already using key cards, or if there's an app that could identify the customers, perhaps then the reusable, wristbands aren't required. There are reusable solutions, so like these silicone bands that could be washed and sanitized, but they could very easily be removed and given to other people that are not on all-inclusive. So your customer demographic is probably going to play a big part in that decision. Crafted bands, like friendship bands, I thought were quite nice. Could be made locally, linked to other sustainability initiatives. If they are nice like these, very likely the guest is going to wear them home, so you need to constantly invest in replacing them, but I think it's much easier to do that if it's linked to a community engagement plan. Shoe covers, there's actually quite a lot of reusable shoe cover styles. Again, if you do an internet search for them, and the pair on the right actually looks like the girl's got on a whole, you know, pair of yellow trainers, but if you zoom in on the picture, they're actually like little short silicone socks, so really good non-slip, great for kitchen areas and high usage. So there are quite a lot of those around. Again, you need to look at your processes for collecting, washing them, drying them, redistributing to people that need to wear them. And dispensers for different things, so to avoid many hand sanitizers, but there was also something in there about sunscreens. I think since the pandemic, dispensing units they've really moved on as well in terms of usability for staff, you know, that need to keep them clean and in good working order, and for us, for them to be user friendly. There's a lot available now where they don't require an inner pouch, so you can just refill from larger format. Sunscreen, I think, is going to be a bit more difficult because dispensers exist. I was actually quite surprised by this, but given people's preference for sunscreens that are going to be compatible with their skin type or the sun protection factor that they prefer, not sure dispensers are the way to go. But if you did decide to do it, there's a quite nice message you can see there about protecting the oceans by using reef safe sunscreen, and perhaps that's just a message that you could use anyway, even if you don't decide to go down the dispenser route, just to raise awareness with people on that. And then to avoid miniature hand sanitizers, perhaps actually looking at portable washing, hand washing stations that could be placed around different areas of the premises if it's easy enough to plumb them in. So there are quite a lot of possibilities out there. And we're on to the last category, hygiene related. So in previous slides, we've already covered dining and room service and disposable shoe covers and all of those things. In terms of masks and shields, I think providing reusable ones for staff and having procedures in place to ensure that they are regularly changed and properly washed is key. You've probably all got brilliant procedures for this now that you've perfected over the last years. Medical caps could be replaced with reusable hair nets, for example, that we saw in the kitchen slides. In terms of high touch Surfaces, I think avoiding film for these types of things now. I used to ask myself when I seen these, what is the point of the plastic cover? Because what the plastic cover is doing, it's not stopping germs, it's keeping the remote control clean. That's not the point. The plastic covers were put on in order to stop infection from spreading and germs from spreading. But if you don't clean the plastic cover, the plastic film, then actually we're doing nothing at all. And when you think about it, if you look at high touch areas in and around your premises, particularly hotels, are we covering things like the lift buttons in plastic? No. Are we covering serving spoons at the buffet in plastic? No. We should ideally, to prevent any kind of cross-contamination, be changing serving spoons quite regularly. They recommend every 20 minutes to change the serving spoons completely. How often, ask yourselves, do the lift buttons get cleaned on a daily basis, especially ground floor where everybody's going? If you've got a rooftop pool where everybody's going, that's where you're getting a lot of cross-contamination. Very often before, when we did work with hotels around this, rather than focus on the buffet, we focused on areas like this, and you will see a drastic reduction in the amount of illness cases. Everybody always relates it to food, not necessarily, but we're treating high touch surfaces differently in a way that just doesn't make logical sense. So it's really thinking through those processes instead of always relating on the product.